are a way to counterbalance the effect of drought. You can't make it rain. You may not be able to change the climate patterns that have been altered by the El Niños and the general global warming patterns. But you can use a wetland specialist to keep the water you've got where you can use it, rather than letting it rush on down to the ocean as fast as possible. So wetlands can help us with floods also. In fact, there would be very little flooding if we had more wetlands. And some people think, no, that's wrong, it can't be right. Wetlands cause floods, right? I've heard that a lot. Well, wetlands can cause floods if you built in a wetland in the first place and you didn't manage the hydrology properly. Yeah. Oh, it's that wetland next door that is causing my basement to flood. Well, that wetland next door used to be the wetland where you built too. And you've got a high water table here. That's kind of what it is in my neighborhood. Okay? But we can restore wetlands. Let's look at the graphics. This top one here shows a simpler system, intact wetlands, even though they look like ponds, and a stream channel through here. So you got rainwater that would come and would hit. It would be stored temporarily or permanently in those ponds or wetlands, and eventually through groundwater seep into the stream. Now here in the bottom graphic, drains have been put in and channels and ditches have been built, and those wetlands are drained. And now when it rains, that water goes very quickly into the river, and then the river can't handle it all. And the river overflows, and then this nice house over here gets flooded. So if you restored those wetlands, then you'd have that cushion, you'd have that buffer, you'd have that sponge, as wetlands are often called, that would temporarily store that water and reduce the flooding downstream. There's people that try to put dollar value to this, and not everybody comes up with the same dollar value, but it seems that in '93, when the Mississippi River rose so much that it almost got to the base of the arch in St. Louis, it was up really, really high. And that's a wide basin there in that river. That was a lot of water. There was something like $20 billion worth of damage done to the man-made structures along the Mississippi River there. That's a lot of damage from a flood. How can you fix that? Well, if instead of spending $20 billion to rebuild, you had spent a fraction of that to restore wetlands in the upper Mississippi, you wouldn't get that flooding. If you hadn't built dikes, if we hadn't used the Army Corps of Engineers to build these levees that border the river and prevent the river from expanding into the natural floodplain, if that hadn't been done, the water would have slowly built up and slowly come downstream and never raised up that high, never done anywhere close to $20 billion worth of damage. So we're pretty sure that wetland restoration, just in terms of flood control, is a cost-effective way. It's hard to do the economics on these things because flood management is not something that is bought and sold at the stock market or in the store on the corner. You know, these sorts of things, it's hard to put dollar values to. But you know how much damage was done. You know how much the price of land is. You know how much water can be stored in a wetland when there is a major rain event. You can do that kind of math, and you can be proactive, and you can prevent these 100-year floods if you just change the way you do things. So it's like, as a community, as a society, where do you want to put your money? Do you want to put it into dikes and bridge and city repair when there's a flood? Or do you want to put it in a wetland upstream to prevent that kind of thing from happening? What would be a better use of your money? Well, I think it would be the wetland restoration. Because not only do you get flood control, you get biodiversity, You get places where plants and animals can live that are threatened or endangered. You get recreational opportunities. You get beautiful panoramas. There's a lot of reasons to restore a wetland. Here's some numbers. Anybody good with numbers? Is there an accountant in here? Okay, $20 billion worth of damage. Restoration of 13 million acres of wetlands would cost $2 to $3 billion. Reducing damages by an anticipated $16 billion. So you'd still have $4 billion in damages compared to 20. But what's the return on your investment? If you're a business person and you go to the bank and you say, hey, I need a loan. I've got this business plan. I need $3 billion. But I'm gonna make $16 billion with it because I have a good business plan. If you can map out that business plan and you've got a good banker, you might just get that loan. That would be a good investment. And of course, erosion. I mean, it's a sad thing. You don't get that land back. It washes down. It carries a lot of things with it. You lose land, you lose acreage, you lose the quality of land when topsoil is lost. Rivers get cloudy, doesn't support the same diversity of fish and other animals in the river when that happens. But if you've got floodplains like this swamp forest pictured here, you've got a place where rainwaters, when there are these strong, severe storms, rainwaters can expand and slow down and become calm. Take the energy out of these gushing waters. And then slowly let that infiltrate into the ground, become part of the groundwater, or slowly be released back into the stream channel, and maybe a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks later, move downstream instead of all at once. Well, we need land that can allow rivers to expand when that happens. So that costs some money. Is there a way to calculate how much money you need or how much it's worth to do that? What is the value of having a floodplain that functions to reduce flooding downstream? Well, how much does sediment cost us? It costs an awful lot. They've got to dredge out the Cuyahoga River in Cleveland on a regular basis. That's not cheap. And then we all wonder, well, what are they going to do with all those dredgings? It's too expensive to impound it. We've got to dump all that stuff out in the middle of the lake. So you have all of these issues, and it's because we don't have enough of these. So instead of spending billions of dollars dredging, maybe if you put a small fraction of that into protecting some riparian corridors and letting the floodplains do their job, you wouldn't have to dredge the harbors quite so much. I think it would be a good investment. I think there's a good return on your investment when you do that. And of course, groundwater, we don't often think about groundwater. It's there. We don't see it. And unless you've got a well on your property, if you have city water, you don't think of it. But I bet out here there's a few people that have their own well water.
Oh, yeah.
I'll bet there are. And some people like having good, clean well water that they don't have to pay somebody else for. They just have to keep their well functioning properly. That can be a pretty good deal. It can be pretty sweet. This goes a little bit beyond what I used to teach in 8th grade for the water cycle, but it's there. So you got evaporation, condensation, precipitation, all those nice Ations in there. And normally in 8th grade I don't go much beyond that because that's an awful lot to handle. But there's also infiltration that is a part of that water cycle. And so we've got water that is caught in a wetland here instead of quickly running off into the river and into the ocean, and is able to seep on down into the aquifer and keep it a healthy aquifer. Means that we're going to have drinking water that is good and healthy and pure for a long, long time. protecting our aquifers is good. And wetlands are the main way you want to do that. If everything is drained, if we've got hard surfaces everywhere, cityscapes, if we've got ditches everywhere, if we've got drainage tiles everywhere, and we're doing everything we can to get that water off of the land and down to the lake, we're not giving it a fair chance to infiltrate and feed the aquifers. Wetlands are a great way to do that. Fortunately, Geauga County has that. And biodiversity. You know, I've been doing wetlands for a long time, and there's all this hydrology and flood and drought and infiltration and all that kind of stuff that's really pretty academic to me. What really grabs me, what really attracts me to wetlands is the biodiversity. To go out and see, you know, herons and egrets in the marsh and ducks and that sort of thing. All the wonderful variety of macroinvertebrates in our vernal pools, those living things are what attract me and really keep me interested. Wetlands will help us do that. We can reverse this trend of losing or having listed so many of our plants and animals. We can reverse that by providing them with more habitat. That's what they need. And not just marshes, but swamps and, you know, small wetlands and large wetlands are all needed. Harmful algae blooms. Can wetlands help us with harmful algae blooms? Of course. Of course. For a long time, people have referred to wetlands as the kidneys of the landscape. Okay, and we know what kidneys do. They clean the blood. Okay, they get the impurities out of our blood. Well, wetlands do that too. If water is allowed to pass through a wetland, like this, on its way downstream, then a lot of the nutrients, a lot of the pollutants, a lot of the toxics, a lot of the E. coli that might get into the water is being taken out. So that as that water exits the wetland, it is much cleaner than when it comes in. And we know this. Ohio State University has had a wetland research park for 25 years where they do just that. They've pumped water out of the Olentangy River through a couple of kidney-shaped wetlands. I don't know how they came up with that design. And they have monitored it ever since. The water quality that is coming out of the Olentangy River and the water quality that is going back into it. And it is continuing to take nutrients and toxins out of the water. They're also doing that in Old Woman Creek, National Estuarine Research Reserve over by Huron. When we do the science, we know it works. You know, the question is, with all of the nutrient loading that we've got, how many acres of wetlands do we need? That can still be a question. You know, do we need to convert 1% of the Great Black Swamp back into swamp? Or is it closer to 10%? We're not quite sure. It may be closer to 10% to really do the job, so that the Maumee River is no longer feeding nutrients into the harmful algae blooms in Lake Erie. So there's a whole chart of all of the different values and benefits that you can talk about for wetlands, all of the benefits that you can have. Some of them you can actually put a dollar value to. You know, if you're trapping for muskrats and you're selling the pelts for $3, well, you've got a market value that you can put on that. Okay? It's hard to put a market value on phosphorus removal. We don't have a phosphorus exchange set up. Maybe that'll come, where somebody could actually install a wetland, measure how much phosphorus is being taken out of, and charge the guy that's putting phosphorus into the water for their removal, or get some kind of a subsidy for that, so that they don't have to take it out of the filtration plant downstream. That would be good. But I tell you, when I get out on a wetland, when I look out over a marsh, it just changes me. It's kind of like the the way you would feel going into a sauna. You know, it relaxes me. It inspires me. It is psychologically soothing to see an expanse of water and wetland plants and wildlife. And I don't know how to put a dollar value on that. I don't know if we ever will. But I love wetlands. Wetlands will save the world, might save my psyche. You know, when I need to get fixed, that's a good place for me to go. But there are so many environmental problems that can all be solved with the focus on wetland protection and restoration. You know we've got to do it. We've got to do it here and we've got to do it now. So wetlands will save the world. Thank you for a chance to talk.
Thank you, Ray. If there was any questions for Ray, please.
Questions? Yes, sir.
Ray, I don't want to sandbag you, but everybody in this room is going to get asked this question this year.
Okay.
Wetlands are swamps. They're full of mosquitoes. Mosquitoes breed mosquito.
West Nile virus.
Yeah, West Nile.
Zika.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, what do I say to them?
Yes,
We're along.
there are mosquitoes in swamps. It is true. There's not much that can be done about that, but if you have a healthy swamp, if you have a healthy marsh, you will have fewer mosquitoes. Often, mosquito populations are augmented when there are impacts. If you don't have a good amphibian population, if there's some kind of pollution that gets into the wetland and knocks out some of the amphibian population, you're knocking out some of the organisms that are eating the mosquito larvae. Okay, so you want a healthy, well-balanced wetland. That is going to be the best solution for getting rid of the mosquitoes. An example I like to bring up, at Old Woman Creek, they've got this beautiful estuary. It gets filled in July with all these lotus blossoms. It's really quite a sight to see. And every year for the last 100 and some years, they've been going out to enjoy these beautiful wetland flowers in canoes. Nobody has ever gotten a mosquito bite in all this time. It's a phenomenon. It is a well-balanced, it's a state nature preserve. It's a well-balanced ecosystem, and there's very few mosquitoes. That doesn't always happen, but it can happen. Here's the other side of the story. Many of the disease vector mosquitoes do not breed in wetlands. They are cavity breeders, which means all they need is a bird bath. All they need is a little water backed up in your gutter. All they need is a spare tire that didn't get disposed of properly. And all they need is a few days in order to breed. Okay, so I have mosquitoes in my neighborhood, and I'm a mile from a wetland. Those mosquitoes aren't traveling a mile to get to my backyard. They're probably coming from my gutter if I don't clean the leaves out. So, I guess the best answer is wear insecticide at dusk. That'll help. Remove the breeding spots in the property that you can manage in the made environment. That'll make a big impact. And help promote healthy wetlands. Is that satisfactory?
More frogs, less cavities.
Correct. That's right. Keep the ecology in balance and don't do the things that favor the mosquitoes.
Draining the swamp won't solve the problem.
Correct. Correct. Yes?
Do you have information back there on rain gardens or how to start rain gardens?
I don't have it back there, but we are working on that. So, yeah, I'd like to be able to help you out. It's just kind of it's in process right now, and we will be putting things on our website that will help with that. What I would recommend, though, is that you come over to Lorain County at the end of May for our annual meeting and garden party, and I will show you my rain gardens. And we're having a native plant sale there, and you can populate your new rain garden with products that will help support our wetland efforts.
Hey, Ray,
Yes?
just an FYI, Geauga County Soil and Water Conservation District, actually did one of the first rain garden brochures describing how to do it, and they're still available, so.
Yes?
Okay, so I have this pond that was built like 50 years ago, and it's a wetlands, and it's been filling up with all these toxins and things. It used to be 14 feet deep, now it's like 8 feet deep,
Okay.
and pretty soon it's not gonna be there anymore. So how do I restore it? What do I do to keep it interrupting the water from going down into the Sugar River?
Right, that's natural succession. That happens with wetlands around here and bogs. Morgan Swamp used to be much larger. You see so much of wetlands and kettle bogs and that sort of thing that have slowly filled in. You know, they've had 10,000 years or more of succession for that to happen. I don't know that you would want to undo succession, since it is a natural process, but I might encourage you to increase the size. I mean, the alternative would be to dredge, and I don't think that's a good idea. But if you can expand the size of the wetland, if your idea is to interrupt the flow of water so that it can be a good functioning kidney on the landscape,
What's kidney cake?
that helps, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, the government gave us.
You don't want it square.
Rectangular, you know. We didn't like the rectangular.
Yeah, the answer may be more complicated, and you maybe need to get a designer on hand to look at ways that you can expand and enhance the wetland that you've got, so that it has more water holding capacity and a longer flow through time, so that it has more time to work with the water. So those would be ways to improve it. In the corner.
What's your opinion of Ducks Unlimited and them being active in restoring marshes and promoting growth of marshes?
Yeah, I've been a member of Ducks Unlimited for many years. I've never hunted, but I support them because of the work they do in restoration. I have talked to them. I have seen that the work that they've done. They do a really good job on a number of fronts. They identify restoration areas. They've been very active in Northwest Ohio. They're able to funnel a lot of outside money into wetland restoration, so they're able to attract money. They're really good project managers. So they know how to get a good design, they know how to get good equipment, they can execute these grant funds very effectively. They're probably one of the best. There are other organizations, other nonprofits that can do that. The Nature Conservancy would be another that is able to do that kind of restoration work.
So you consider them a good partner?
Yes,
Yeah.
I would think so. Historically, meaning like over the last 100 years or so, they have been the point guards for wetland protection and restoration. And a lot of the coastal wetlands along Lake Erie in particular wouldn't be there if it hadn't been for their effort.
Thank you.
So, yeah, it is, you know, it's the private hunting clubs and the duck clubs on Sandusky Bay and in Ottawa County and that sort of thing.
That's right.
You know, it's people who want to take a few that are really making sure that the population has been stable.
Yeah. Thanks.
Back here?
Having grown up in the Maumee River Valley, which I always thought was an oxymoron, it's pretty flat there.
It is.
Have these blooms in the last couple of years jump-started efforts for wetlands upstream towards Napoleon, towards Indiana, towards upstream from Toledo, that you're aware of? Or is it?
That's kind of the holy grail. That's really what we want to see, is that Every tributary on the Maumee would have a substantial wetland for the water to pass through before it reached the main trunk of the Maumee River. And you're right, it is incredibly flat there. In glacial times, you know, when Lake Erie was kind of blocked by glaciers, the river actually flowed in the opposite direction. That's how flat it is. And, you know, that seems kind of crazy that water would flow from Lake Erie directly into the Mississippi Valley, but it is so flat and shallow. There's barely even a divide between the Lake Erie watershed and the Mississippi watershed at about Fort Wayne, Indiana. So it's kind of crazy. What a great opportunity for wetlands. I have talked to the people at Black Swamp Conservancy, which is the big land conservancy in northwest Ohio, and that is also one of their goals, is to restore wetlands. And they've done a couple of projects, and I would like to work more closely with them, and we've talked about some plans, but it's a matter of getting the money, focusing the money, big chunks of it, finding willing landowners who would be able to sell the land or convert it to pass-through wetlands. That's the big thing. Many of the hunt clubs have diked, isolated wetlands where the water levels are managed, and there's reasons to do that. But what you really need is to take water from upstream, pass it through a wetland, and release it downstream in order to get the water purification function to work.
No good crisis goes unutilized, right?
Well, the intention is there now, and there is a lot of money being directed at ways to solve the nutrient loading problem in the Maumee Valley. Not a lot of it is about wetland restoration, unfortunately. A lot of it is about farm management practices. Yes?
The road department in Chester, where there are a lot of open ditches, likes to come by every year and dig the ditches deeper and wider.
Mm-hmm.
And where we have cattails and a lot of native plants, they pull them all out. What
They got trees
sources,
down in the ditches.
or they don't have to because they fall down. What sources, how can I convince them that this is not good management?
Oh, gosh, I think you're gonna run into a real problem there, because every county has a drainage management plan that they're really obliged to maintain.
Are they advised by any biologists or anybody?
I don't think it's a biological issue at all. It's all hydrology. I mean, a lot of the infrastructure that we have built over the last 150 years depends on being able to move the water off of the land. And to just randomly prevent that, you know, like releasing beavers randomly into the landscape, might do a lot of harm to some property owners. So, yeah, there'd have to be another way of doing it, and it might be that diverting ditch water into a bioswale kind of situation that was a kind of an adjacent wetland area, so that excess water could continue to move on and perform the function that it does, but also have kind of a roadside rain garden that would make use of that and allow these little habitats along the way. That could be a tough problem. Yeah. Yes, sir?
How much impact does invasive non-native species of plants versus invasive native plants, how much impact has that made on all this preservation?
Yeah, invasive plant species in wetlands is a huge problem. Phragmites is one of the biggest, purple loosestrife is another, reed canary grass is another, and there are many, and they can be very difficult to manage. And what they tend to do is reduce the overall biodiversity. So these are plants that are not local, they're not native, and they come in and they're able to exploit the environment at the expense of the native plants. So where you may have had a wetland with 50 different species of plants. You get Phragmites move in, and now you've got nothing but Phragmites, or maybe one or two other plant species. And so that's a biodiversity decrease. And then there's many birds that don't want to use the Phragmites for nesting habitat. It's just not suitable for them, they're unfamiliar with it. So there could be a cascading effect of diversity loss when you have an invasion by those kinds of aggressive, non-native, invasive plants. Okay, Fraser, yes?
That grass that you talked about, is that real tall stuff?
Yep, Phragmites is way up overhead, has this beautiful ostrich plume kind of top to it.